I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner, and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my books beside my bed video for everyone, where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This week did include a readathon. I was low-key participating in the Shiftathon Readathon, which is hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes and Matthew, and I have completely forgotten his channel name, but I'll leave them linked down below. It was a pretty fun week. I was reading a lot of urban fantasy, paranormal romance throughout the week, which was really nice. Before I get into any of the stats, welcome to my two newest members, Izzy and Temecka. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Now, jumping straight into the books that I read this week. So this is my reading week from the 12th until the 18th of February. I read a total of 13 things throughout the week, which equated to 2,590 pages, and my yearly reading total is 87 books. A lot of these were short stories and novellas that I read over the weekend because I literally just collapsed on the couch and binge read for an entire weekend because I was so tired after work went back. And I am still really tired, so apologies for, any lack of coherence, which is entirely possible. The first book that I read this week was Resolution Revolution by Evie Mitchell. This is the 10th book in the Capricorn Cove series, and this actually follows a couple that I have read about in many other books, but because I'm reading all of Evie Mitchell's books completely out of order, I hadn't read how they got together. So this was really fun. This is a New Year's story, and it follows Karen, who is a podcaster, and she is set up to go and try some challenging tasks for her by her producer. And on one of these, which happens to be sort of like a flying fox rock climbing type thingy, she ends up meeting Will, who's there with some of his sons. And they do this all the time, so they're super confident and she's really not. And Will helps her through the day, and then they connect and he asks her out, and it's really, really sweet. This is an older romance. Both the heroine and the hero are older, and Will is a single dad to his own children, but he also fosters children, and we meet many of them throughout the series, and Jay from Not My Type is one of those kids. So it was really nice to come back and read Will's story and see how he got together with Karen. I also read a book called Deep Deep Donuts, which is an entirely hilarious title, but this is by Megan Wade. It is the first book in the Lovers Lake series, and the Lovers Lake books are a collection of stories that were written around a similar theme by lots of authors. I had read Evie Mitchell's one, I think last week. This one, just the title made me laugh, so I had to read it. It is about Tamara, who has a donut truck, and previously she had an ice cream truck, and that sort of fell through, and so she decided to start a donut truck, and she sets up shop near the lake, and it's all going well, except she hasn't had time to file the proper permits for the donut truck. She has them for the ice cream truck, but not the donut one. And so anytime she sees Officer Lee coming past, she freaks out, shuts up shop, pretends she's run out of product, and hightails it out of there. And it turns out that Wes, who is Officer Lee, just really likes donuts, and he gets really frustrated every time the donut shop seems to close just as he gets there. He's not thinking about checking her permits or anything like that. So there's this little miscommunication trope, but it is really cute and really sweet and just a really fun little read. I also read Magic Triumphs. This is for the Kate Daniels read-along, which has been postponed a week, so we should be having it this coming weekend. And this is the final book in the Kate Daniels series. It's book 10, and it was really nice to come back and revisit this book because the series as a whole is just really fantastic, and it's contained in these 10 plus books because there's little side stories that happen, and I loved it. I love how this sort of arc of this part of the world wraps up. We know there's more that's coming. We've got Julie's spin-off series, and I just enjoy being here. These are comfort reads for me. I like seeing how Kate and Karen have grown as characters throughout the series. Obviously I'm not going to talk spoilers because, final book. We get lots of lovely little check-ins with all of the major players and all the major side characters that we've met throughout the series as they're all sort of coming to a head to the final showdown with Roland. And the sort of mythical creature that appears in this book is, just one that I love seeing in books, and this one, it does it in such a different way to everything else that I've seen it, where it's truly rooted in urban fantasy, and it makes it seem like it could exist in this world, and I love that. So this is awesome. Plus we get Kate being a mum. Kulin is just totally adorable and a really cool addition to the story because everything Kate does, she has to think about how it's going to directly impact her family, and I I really enjoyed it. So I can't wait to talk to Megan and Heather about this in the live show. Then I read 2 books by Dana Izzy. They were 2 books in a series. It's Dipped in Holly and Claimed by Cupid. The first one is a Christmas novella. The second one is a Valentine's novella that came out just before Valentine's Day. They're both KU titles. So Dipped in Holly is a Christmas story where Holly, the heroine, is at a bar with her now currently ex-boyfriend who's just broken up with her, and she dressed up for him for Christmas and he basically humiliated her and she's crying in the bathroom. And the owner of the bar, Nick, comes to get her out and sees that she's in distress and basically, sits her at the bar, gives her a drink, makes her feel really special and really beautiful, and basically tells the ex-boyfriend to back off. And then the 2 have this one-night stand that then, obviously, as we get a second book, becomes something more, and we get their story over New Year's to Valentine's Day as they really decide whether or not this is a long-term relationship that they're going to have. They were both really short and really steamy and a whole lot of fun. I also read Skin by Veda Weiss, which is Fangs with Benefit book 2. So this one is about a banshee called Harbinger, and she has the ability to soak up information from anything that she touches. So she basically wears a full bodysuit, head to toe covered, because anything she touches she picks up on its history or emotions or things like that. And she has a partner for her job called Jasper, and he is a gargoyle. And one night while they are out investigating something, she accidentally comes into skin-to-skin contact with Jasper and realizes that he is in love with her and he desires her and all of that sort of thing. And then the 2 of them have to sort of reconcile their personal and their professional relationship, and it is super hot and just awesome. I really liked these characters and would love to see more of them. I also caught up on the Monstrous series by Lily Mayne, so I finally read Gloam, and I realized there's another book coming out in the next month or so I'm really excited about that. Again, this is an monster romance series, so that's pretty much what you're getting. And this time we are in the perspective of Rig, who is the best friend of the main protagonist from the 3rd book, and they live together in this same sort of raider outpost camp. And Rig has been watching as Collector Mary, who was sort of this, she's not quite the big bad, but she's a nefarious character that was in the 3rd book who has an RV with monsters attached to it. And he becomes really curious about one particular monster who is huge and grey and has this big cage over his head and doesn't talk. But Rig keeps sneaking out to try and communicate with Gloam. And when Collector Mary decides to leave, Rig decides that he is going to go with her because he's determined to free Gloam, and it is their relationship. And what I really loved about this particular book initially is the way that Rig and Gloam have to figure out a way to communicate, because Gloam can't speak or can't physically speak for a good part of the book. His story is just heartbreaking as well, because he's a very gentle kind of character who is really held against his will, but he looks big and imposing and is used as a threat against people who might harm Collector Mary. And I was glad to see what happened to her, because she totally deserved it. This book has everything from monsters to cannibal cults to military gone bad, and we do get to see that there are a whole stack of other potential monster characters that we've met very briefly that may possibly get their own story, and that makes me very happy. I also decided to pick up another Onley James book in a different series. So I read Intoxicating, which is the first book in the Elite Protection series, I believe. Again, this is an romance. This one is about Lincoln, who is hired as a bodyguard for a Conservative senator's son. And the purpose behind him being hired is to keep the son out of trouble, because the senator is very disappointed in his son. Also read controlling, abusive, and a real nasty piece of work. Meanwhile, Wyatt, who is the son, is really going through some bad times. He's been severely traumatized by his father and some things that he's done. So content warnings in here for all of that abuse, plus past sexual abuse and mentions of conversion camps. And all this led to Wyatt attempting to kill himself, and that's why he now has this bodyguard. He is really attracted to Lincoln, who is an older guy who is very serious, who doesn't take any of Wyatt's crap. And one night when Wyatt gets really drunk, he tells Lincoln that he thinks he would make a good daddy. And basically the story goes from there. So there is daddy kink, but there is also Wyatt working through a lot of his issues, and Lincoln having to be patient with that as well. So I really like this one, but I would read up on all the content warnings before you pick it up, because there is a lot that's going on and I know it would be triggering for some people. All right, and then we moved into the books that I read for Shiftathon. So the first thing that I read was A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which is a prequel to the Dead Djinn Universe series, I believe, by P. Jelly Clark. I've been meaning to read this for ages. It is a novella. It is so great and so fun. It is set in 1912 in Egypt, and we have an investigator whose name is Fatma El-Shaari. I apologize profusely for butchering that. And she is a special investigator who leads an investigation into the death of a djinn. And this is very much an alternate urban fantasy steampunk type environment, and these djinn are huge. I will not do the world building justice by trying to explain it, but suffice to say, she is sent to investigate this death, and this means that her paths cross with ghouls. She comes across an assassin, and there is a really cool hint of a relationship, or at least an attraction between the two of them. There are clockwork angels and a whole lot more going on, and it was honestly just so different to anything else I've been reading recently, and I really, really loved it. So I'm hoping at some point to continue the series. I don't know when, because I think it's one that's going to take a lot of brain power just to work my way through, but it would be so worth it. And I read that for the Shiftathon prompt to read something with a paranormal creature from a different religion. Then I read 2 books in the Mystic Bayou series. So I read book 2.5, which was Even Tree Nymphs Get the Blues. This one is about Ingrid, who is new to Mystic Bayou, and she's come there to try and, set up a new home and safe space for herself, and also to start an ice creamery. And I love that. I was just craving ice cream the entire time I was reading this novella. But when she gets to town, she captures the attention of Rob. And Rob is one of the leading data scientists for the League, who have set up shop in Mystic Bayou to sort of monitor and seek to understand the supernatural beings who live in the town. But Ingrid doesn't want that sort of attention. And yet she can't seem to escape Rob. And he's just genuinely interested in her as a person. He's not particularly interested in trying to uncover all of her secrets, but he goes about trying to help her with one thing, and she mistakenly interprets it as something else. And so that is their barrier that they have to overcome. But I just love these books, but they are so fun. The character's great. And I love that we're starting to sort of branch out from the original core characters now into some of the periphery characters, and I'm really enjoying it. And that was for the Shiftathon challenge to read a book about Fae or Elves. I'm grouping Nymphs into that sort of category. I also read book 3 in the series, and that is Selkies Are a Girl's Best Friend. This one is about Sonia, who is the very capable director of the League offices in the town. She's the best friend to the original heroine in the series from the first book, but Sonia is known for being very, very organized, very efficient. If something needs to get done, everyone goes to Sonia, and suddenly her job now requires her to liaise with the newly returned to town Dr. Will, who has not been in Mystic Bayou for years, and his family has a complicated history with the town. His brother still lives there, but is very much a recluse. Will has very mixed feelings about being back in town as well. And he and Sonia clash because they have a very not meet cute first meeting, but then they end up working together, beginning to understand the other person, begin to know a little bit about their past, and also having to work together to help save the town from some more Rift-inspired shenanigans. I can't believe I just used the word shenanigans. Oh my god. Okay. Moving on. Selkies Are a Girl's Best Friend was for the Shiftathon prompt to read a book with shifters other than werewolves, because Will is a Selkie. Then I read another short story / novella in a series that I started ages ago and haven't had a chance to continue, and I read 1.5 installment of the Charlie Davidson series. This was called For I Have Sinned. This entire story is told from the perspective of a woman who has died and has come back as a ghost. And she doesn't remember who she is, she doesn't remember what happened to her, she doesn't even remember when she died. And she ends up coming to Charlie, who is a reaper who can see ghosts. And Charlie tries to help her solve the mystery of who she is and what happened to her so that she can have some closure. This may be considered spoilers, but this is a really short book, but I think they're important to know about it. The main character, the ghost, was a woman who had diabetes with severe complications, and she was pregnant, and the baby is totally fine, but there were complications to do with that and her pregnancy, so be aware of that going into it if that's a trigger for you. I read that for the Shiftathon prompt to read a book with zombies or ghosts, because the main character was a ghost. And then I moved into a book that was not for the readathon but would probably fit somewhere in here, and that was Sealed in Sin by Juliet Cross. This is the second book in the Vessel series. I'm really behind on reviewing these, so I've got to get to that this weekend because I'm so behind. But this is the continuation of the series, and Genevieve and Jude are continuing to sort of navigate the murkier world of demons, angels, demon hunters, saints, you name it. Everything's going on in here. And we get the introduction of guardian angels in this book. which may or may not be a good thing, but Jen's powers are continuing to grow and become more complex, and she's seeking to do more good and to sort of get on the front foot with this war between angels and demons. But of course, she's now got the attention of her guardian angel and also all of the demons who want to try and possess her in order to sway her to the dark side. So it gets pretty complicated. This one felt like the main thing really happened right at the end. So there's a lot of continued world building and things that go on in between sort of the end of the last book and the end of the second book. So some of the pacing felt just a fraction off for me. But that said, I'm very curious to see the direction of the third book because there's a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the second book, and I now just kind of need to know what's going on. And then the final book that I read for Shiftathon was Kiss of Steel by Becca McMaster, and I cannot believe that I sat on this book on my Kindle for years because this was utterly delightful. It was so fun. It is the first book in the London steampunk series, and you have Honoria Todd, who lives with her brother and her sister, and they're in hiding, and she's trying to desperately make ends meet, and they're living in a part of London called the Rookery, and the Rookery is sort of headed up by this rogue blue blood called Blade. And blue bloods are humans who have been infected by this disease called the craving, and they're essentially vampires, but they don't have vampire teeth. And in fact, the way that it's set up is that blue bloods who are completely in control of themselves and who haven't begun to degenerate are really seen as the top tier of society. But if they tip too far on that scale, they can go full-blown vampire, and vampires are a danger to everyone, blue bloods and below. So Blade is a blue blood and he rules this area of the city, and he ends up summoning Honoria to him because she essentially falls under his protection in this part of town, and yet she has never come to offer anything in exchange for that protection. And he doesn't know who she is really, and he doesn't really know the story of her family. But when he meets her, he is very intrigued by her and very, very attracted to her. And so he ends up spending more time with her and realizing that she is involved in some stuff that is incredibly dangerous with one of his enemies, Vickers, who is one of the top blue bloods in London, and together they have to navigate their initially rocky start to a working relationship into a romantic relationship, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually thought this series was going to follow the same characters through each book, but apparently each book is different, so I am very intrigued at some point to continue this series because so many of the side characters are just so interesting. But I liked this take on the vampire sort of myth, and I was really glad that I read it for the Shiftathon prompt to read a book about vampires because this was something very different for me. All right, and those are the books that I have read in the last 7 days. In the comments, I would love to know if you have read any of these books, or feel free to share any other titles that you have been reading in the last 7 days that you would like to recommend to myself or to anyone else who is reading the comments. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, leave a tree emoji down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.